LA Theatre Works presents The Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie, adapted from the novel by Kate McCall, directed by Annalise Erickson, starring Edita Brichta, Kevin Daniels, Simon Helberg, Adir Kalian, Alfred Molina, Darren Richardson, Jocelyn Town, Joanne Whalley, and Matthew Wolfe. In this original LA Theatre Works commission, Detective Hercule Poirot receives an urgent letter from Paul Renauld summoning him to France. When he arrives, Poirot and his companion Hastings find they are too late. And to complicate matters, certain facts just don't add up. And now, The Murder on the Links, produced by LA Theatre Works.
It was a fine summer's day, and I was returning from Paris on the morning service to London. I was deep in thought as the train was pulling out, at which point a young woman, the only other person in the compartment, jumped up from her seat and let down the window.
Oh, hell!
I looked up into a pretty, impudent face, topped by a red hat. I judged that she was little more than 17, but her face was covered with powder, and her lips were quite impossibly scarlet.
I do apologize for my language. Most unladylike and all that. But I've lost my sister.
Really? How unfortunate.
Oh, dear. You disapprove. I am crushed. I shall be quiet.
And with a flourish, she disappeared behind a large French newspaper. A minute or two later, I saw two blue eyes peeping at me over the top.
There. I knew you weren't such a mutt as you looked. You gave me such a disapproving glare, I never thought we could be friends.
Oh, we can. Though I'm not sure I care for being called a mutt. Tell me something about yourself.
Oh, I'm in the theatre. My sister and I do a song and dance act. How about you?
I'm a private secretary to a member of Parliament.
My, that sounds important.
Not really. It's rather boring, actually. There's hardly anything to do. Fortunately, I share lodgings in London with a very interesting man.
Oh?
He's a former policeman from Belgium, now working as a private detective. He's terribly good at it. Time and again he has proved to be right, where the official police have failed. Sometimes he lets me help out.
How thrilling. I just adore crime.
Do you remember the Styles case?
Was that the old lady who was poisoned somewhere down in Essex?
That's it. Well, that was Hercule Poirot's first big case. If it hadn't been for him, the murderer would have escaped scot-free. It was a most wonderful bit of detective work.
Do tell me all about it.
The girl listened, spellbound, as I told her the story, and we became so absorbed in each other that the train drew into Calais station before we realized it.
Well, I suppose it's goodbye.
What about the boat? Won't I see you on the Channel crossing?
I might not be on it. I've got to find my sister first.
But we'll meet again, surely. I do hope we will.
I don't think so. You've been very kind to me on the journey, especially after I cheeked you as I did. But what your face expressed first thing is quite true. I'm not your kind. And that brings trouble, as I know well enough.
Wait! Aren't you even going to tell me your name?
It's Cinderella. Goodbye.
My dear Captain Hastings, you are the hopeless romantic, are you not?
It was 9:15 the following morning, and my friend had just finished his second boiled egg.
You cannot stop talking about this young lady, and yet you do not even know her real name. Pardon, but your tie, it's not symmetrical. Permit that I rearrange him?
Hercule Poirot was an extraordinary little man. Height, 5 feet 4 inches, an egg-shaped head carried a little to one side, stiff military moustache, and piercing green eyes. For neatness of any kind, he had an absolute passion. To see an ornament set crooked, or a speck of dust, or a slight disarray in one's attire, was torture to the little man until he could ease his feelings by remedying the matter.
There. Now, would you be so kind as to pass me the post?
Are you expecting something? A new case, perhaps?
No, mon ami. Nothing of interest arrives nowadays. The great criminals of method no longer exist. I am reduced to recovering lost lapdogs for fashionable ladies.
Cheer up, old bean. Your luck will change.
A bill. Another bill. And now for the last. Ah. This is from Merlinville-sur-Mer, near Calais.
Sounds interesting.
But read for yourself.
Dear sir, on account of a secret I possess, I am in fear of my life. I beg that you will lose no time in crossing to France. I shall probably need your services for a considerable period of time, as it may be necessary for you to go to Santiago. I shall be content for you to name your own fee. Yours faithfully, Paul Renauld. There's a postscript, for God's sake, come.
The Continental Express leaves Victoria at 11 o'clock. You will accompany me, n'est-ce pas?
Well, I'm not entirely certain that I can spare the time.
Hastings, you told me yourself that your MP did not need you for the next few weeks. Santiago, eh? There is a well-known South American millionaire called Renault.
Oh, he said you could name your fee. I suppose if we succeed, we could make our fortunes.
Do not be too sure of that, my friend. A rich man and his money are not so easily parted. I have seen a well-known millionaire turn out a tram full of people to seek for a dropped penny.
Good point.
In any case, it is not the money which attracts me here. There is something a little unusual in this problem which arouses my interest. You remarked the postscript.
For God's sake, come.
How does it strike you?
Well, clearly he wrote the letter keeping himself well in hand, but at the end, his self-control snapped and he scrawled those 4 desperate words.
No, you are in error, mon ami. Do you not see that while the ink of the signature is nearly black, that of the postscript is quite pale?
I don't understand.
Oh, use the little grey cells, mon ami. Always remember the little grey cells. Monsieur Renauld wrote his letter. Without blotting it, he reread it carefully. Then, not on impulse, but deliberately, he added those last words and then blotted the sheet.
But why?
So that it should produce the effect upon me that it has upon you. To make sure of my coming.
On the crossing, the weather was fine, the channel like a mill pond. A little while later, we set off in the most ramshackle of rented automobiles in the direction of the Villa Geneviève at Merlinville-sur-Mer. We were almost at our destination when we passed a girl who stood with one hand on a garden gate, watching us go by.
Hastings, keep your eyes on the road, for heaven's sake.
Sorry, Poirot. Didn't you see that young goddess?
Already you have seen a goddess. Have you forgotten the young lady on the train? What did I say? An impossible romantic.
But she was one of the most beautiful girls I have ever seen. Surely you noticed her.
Mon ami, 2 people rarely see the same thing. You saw a goddess, I saw only a girl with anxious eyes.
Moments later, we drew up in front of a pair of large gates.
Arrêtez, s'il vous plaît, monsieur.
We have an appointment with Monsieur Renauld. This is his villa, isn't it?
Yes, monsieur, it is, but you cannot enter.
This is Hercule Poirot, the famous detective. Monsieur Renauld sent for him personally.
Then I regret to inform you, monsieur, that Monsieur Renauld was murdered this morning.
Murdered?
Then please, convey my card to whoever is in charge.
You say you have information, Monsieur Poirot, which may assist us?
Monsieur Otey, the magistrate, was a tall, gaunt man with piercing dark eyes and a neatly cut grey beard, which he continually caressed as Poirot explained our presence.
Monsieur Renauld wrote me a letter, begging me to come at once. He was convinced an attempt was going to be made on his life.
He foresaw his own murder?
It would appear so. Obviously, he sent for me too late. At what time was the crime committed?
The body was discovered this morning about 9 o'clock. Madame Renaud's evidence, and that of the doctors, indicates that the death must have occurred about 2 a.m. You have the letter here, Monsieur Poirot?
Please, read it for yourself.
He speaks of a secret. What a pity he was not more explicit. Are you obliged to return to London, Monsieur Poirot? Or might you be willing to assist us in our investigations?
Monsieur Otte, I very much regret that I did not arrive in time to prevent my client's death. Therefore, I feel myself honor-bound to discover the assassin. My companion, Captain Hastings, will assist me.
Excellent. Then let me tell you what we have learned thus far. This morning, the old servant, Françoise, found the front door ajar. Feeling a momentary alarm as to burglars, she looked into the dining room, but seeing the silver was safe, thought no more about it, concluding that her master had risen early and gone for a stroll. Then Léonie, the younger maid, taking a breakfast tray to her mistress, as usual, was horrified to discover her gagged and bound. And almost at the same moment, news was brought that Monsieur Renaud's body had been discovered, stone dead, stabbed in the back.
Where was the body found?
That is one of the most extraordinary features of the case, Monsieur Poirot. The body was lying face downwards in an open grave.
What?
Yes. The pit was freshly dug, just a few yards outside the boundary of the villa grounds.
How long had he been dead?
The doctor examined the body this morning and concluded that death must have taken place between 7 and 10 hours previously.
That fixes it at between midnight and 3 a.m.
Exactly. It appears that 2 masked men entered the master bedroom. Then they gagged and bound Madame Renaud, whilst forcibly abducting her husband.
This you know from Madame Renaud herself?
No. Madame has been under sedation since hearing the news of her husband's death. We know this from the 2 servants who found her. I was about to interview them further.
Are there any other family members or employees in the house?
There is the chauffeur, but Monsieur Renaud sent him on holiday yesterday. Then there's Jacques Renaud, the son, though he too is away from home at present.
Why choose yesterday to send the chauffeur on a holiday? Did Monsieur Renaud want him out of the way before we arrived? Well, shall we begin at the beginning?
Certainly. Sergeant, bring in the housekeeper Françoise.
Oui, monsieur.
In a moment or two, the sergeant returned, escorting an elderly woman. Poirot watched carefully as the magistrate began by questioning her about the front door.
I don't know why it was open, monsieur. I always close it myself every night.
And last night?
I fastened it as usual. I swear it by the blessed saints.
What time would that be?
10:30 as always. Madame had retired some time before. Monsieur was still in his study.
Well, then if anyone unfastened the door afterwards, it must have been Monsieur Renaud himself?
But what should he do that for? He closed it after he let the lady out.
What lady?
The lady who came to see him.
You are saying that yesterday evening a lady came to see Monsieur Renaud?
Oh, yes, and many other evenings as well. I heard them come out of the study and go to the door. Monsieur said good night and shut the door after her.
What time was that?
About 25 minutes after 10, monsieur.
Who was this lady?
I know well enough who she was. It was Madame de Breuil.
Madame de Breuil? From the Villa Marguerite, just down the road?
That is what I said, monsieur.
So, Madame de Breuil and Monsieur Renaud, they were...
Monsieur Renaud was very rich. Madame de Breuil is very poor. She's no longer young, that is true. But I have seen the men's heads turn after her as she goes down the street. Besides, she has had more money to spend lately. All the town knows it.
Did you hear any sound of disturbance during the night?
Nothing, monsieur.
Very well, Françoise, you may go.
He then called the younger servant, Léonie, who gave a rather hysterical description of finding her mistress trussed up, but she, like Françoise, had heard nothing during the night.
Was it you who admitted Madame de Breuil to the house last night?
Not last night, monsieur, the night before.
But Françoise has just told us that Madame de Breuil was here last night.
No, monsieur. A lady did come to see Monsieur Renauld last night, but it was not Madame de Broglie.
Another lady? You are mistaken, surely.
No, sir, I am not. I know Madame de Broglie. This other lady was shorter and younger and English. Monsieur Renauld spoke to her in English. I heard him say, for God's sake, go now.
Thank you, Leonie. You may go back to your duties.
Merci, monsieur.
Well, we have directly conflicting testimony. Who are we to believe, Françoise or Leonie? Oh, I nearly forgot. Monsieur Poirot, this note was found in the pocket of the dead man's overcoat.
My dearest one, why have you not written for so long? Your letters lately have been so different, cold and strange. And now this long silence. Sometimes I fancy another woman is coming between us. I'd as soon kill you as let her have you. I mean it. But there I'm writing nonsense. You love me and I love you. Your own adoring Bella. No address or date. A rather unformed hand. And the assumption is, Monsieur Ote?
Obviously, Monsieur Renauld was previously entangled with this Englishwoman, Bella. Then he comes over here, meets Madame de Broglie, and starts an intrigue with her. He cools off to the other, Bella, and she instantly suspects something. This letter contains a distinct threat. And the fact that Monsieur Renauld was stabbed in the back seemed to point distinctly to it being a woman's crime.
The stab in the back, yes, but the grave. No woman digs a grave, monsieur. That was a man's doing.
Yes, you are right. We did not think of that.
You have found no other letters from this Bella among Monsieur Renaud's effects?
No. Well, of course, one of our first proceedings was to search through his private papers in the study, but we found nothing of interest. The only thing at all out of the ordinary was his will.
Do you have it?
Yes, of course. Here.
So he left everything unconditionally to his beloved wife. It is dated a fortnight ago. Possibly it marks his first intimation of danger.
It's a little hard on his son, n'est-ce pas? Since it leaves him entirely dependent on his mother. If she were to marry again, he might never touch a penny of his father's money.
Man is a vain animal. Monsieur Renauld could not believe that his widow would marry again. As to the son, it may have been a wise precaution to leave the money in his mother's hands. The sons of rich men are proverbially wild.
Indeed. Now, Monsieur Poirot, no doubt you will like to visit the scene of the crime. The body has been removed, but, of course, photographs have been taken from every conceivable angle and will be at your disposal as soon as they are available.
I thank you, monsieur, for all your courtesy.
Come with me, monsieur.
That room there, is that the study of Monsieur Renauld?
Yes. Would you like to see it?
The room, which Monsieur Renauld had chosen for his own particular use, was small, and at the end of the room opposite the window there was a handsome oak sideboard with a tantalus on top. Poirot stood a moment and drew a finger gingerly over the surface of the sideboard. His face expressed complete approval.
Not a particle of dust. And for once, perhaps it is a pity. The rug is crooked. I will set it straight. In France, as in England, the domestics omit to sweep under the mats.
What is it?
It's a fragment of paper. Part of a check, with the word Duveen written in ink. And if I'm not mistaken, the handwriting is that of Monsieur Renauld.
Dear me, I really cannot imagine how I came to overlook this.
The moral of that is always look under the mats, especially crooked mats. My friend Hastings here will tell you that anything in the least bit crooked is a torment to me.
Voilà. Here's Renaud's checkbook. The last counterfoil is blank.
Perhaps Madame Renauld will be able to tell us all about this mysterious person named Duveen when she wakes up. But more urgently, where is Monsieur Renaud's body?
Allow me to escort you.
We were led outside to the back of the house, where there was a small shed. The door was unlocked, and we passed inside. The murdered man lay on the ground under a white cloth.
Would you be so kind as to remove the sheet, Captain Hastings?
I leaned forward and whipped off the covering to reveal a clean-shaven man with a long, thin nose and eyes set rather close together. His lips were drawn back from his teeth, and an expression of absolute amazement and terror was stamped on his livid features.
Help me turn him over.
Of course.
There. You see? A small dark patch between his shoulder blades.
And a slit in his coat, where the knife went in, presumably.
Monsieur Otte, where is the murder weapon?
It is here, Monsieur Poirot, in this glass jar. It has the appearance of a small paper knife.
Let me see. Ma foi! But it is sharp. A nice, easy little tool for murder.
Unfortunately, we could find no trace of fingerprints on it. The murderer must have worn gloves.
Of course he did. I see Monsieur Renauld wore only underclothes under his overcoat.
Yes, that is rather a curious point.
And he wore his overcoat curiously long.
Monsieur, Madame says she is much recovered and is ready to receive the examining magistrate.
We will come at once.
We made our way back to the house and proceeded upstairs together, Poirot treading in a deliberate zigzag fashion.
Every board creaks, fit to wake the dead.
Come in.
We entered a large, sunny room looking out towards the sea. On a couch, propped up with cushions, lay a striking-looking woman whose once dark hair was now almost entirely silvered.
Pray be seated, gentlemen.
I hope, Madame, that it will not distress you unduly to relate to us what occurred last night.
Not at all, monsieur. I know you must act swiftly if you are to catch the murderers.
Very well, Madame. Perhaps you could tell us what happened?
Paul and I went to bed as usual. And then I was awakened in the early hours by a hand being pressed over my mouth. I tried to scream out, but the hand prevented me. There were 2 men in the room. They were both masked.
Can you describe them at all, Madame?
One was very tall and had a long black beard. The other was short and stout. His beard was reddish. They both wore hats pulled down over their eyes. One of them forced a gag into my mouth and then bound me with rope hand and foot. Then the other took my little paper knife from the dressing table.
It was your knife.
Yes. My son gave it to me as a present. He had it forged from aircraft cable after he left the Air Force.
Please continue.
Yes, forgive me. So then, they forced my husband to get up and accompany them into the dressing room next door. They were shouting.
Could you hear what they were saying?
They spoke South American Spanish. They were angry and were asking something about a secret. I couldn't quite catch it. They hustled him out of the door, saying, "One sound and you're a dead man." After that, I must have fainted. The next thing I recollect is Leonie giving me brandy.
Madame Renauld, have you any idea about this secret?
None whatever, monsieur.
Were you aware that your husband was afraid of something?
I had seen the change in him, yes. 10 days ago, perhaps. He seemed distracted and anxious.
Did you question your husband at all as to the cause?
I tried, but he wouldn't tell me.
Were you aware that he had called in the services of a detective?
No.
Yes. This gentleman, Monsieur Hercule Poirot.
Madame Renauld, I arrived today in response to a summons from your husband. He said he felt his life to be in danger.
Madame, is there anything in your husband's past life in South America which might throw light on his murder?
Oh, certainly my husband had enemies. People he had got the better of in some way or another, but I can't think of anything in particular.
What time did these men take your husband?
I distinctly remember hearing the clock on the mantelpiece strike 2.
No, there is a wristwatch on the floor. Knocked off the dressing table by the assassins, no doubt. Oh.
What is it?
The hands of the watch point to 7 o'clock. The glass is broken, yes, but the watch itself is still going.
But surely it is not 7 o'clock now?
No, it is a few minutes after 5.
Madame, do you know anyone of the name of Duveen?
Duveen? No, I cannot say I do.
Do you know anyone of the name Bella?
No.
Madame Renauld, are you aware that your husband had a visitor last night?
No, who was it?
A lady.
Indeed?
And do you recognize this?
Oh, yes. That is my little paper knife. The one the men took last night. Is that blood?
Yes, madame. Your husband was killed with this weapon.
Oh!
Forgive me, madame. Your son, where is he now? It is necessary that he should be telegraphed without delay.
Jack was in Paris, but now he's on his way to Buenos Aires.
What?
Yes, my husband instructed him to go yesterday. There was a boat leaving Cherbourg last night, and he wired him to catch it.
Do you know why your husband wished him to go to Buenos Aires?
No, but that was not my son's final destination. He was going overland from there to Santiago.
Ah, Santiago again. Madame Renauld, I hoped your son would be near at hand so that we could have saved you distress.
You mean the identification of my husband's body? I am a strong woman, monsieur. I can bear all that is required of me. I am ready now.
A cloak was thrown over Madame Renault's shoulders, and a slow procession went down the stairs. In a minute or two, she stood in the doorway of the shed, and the body was revealed.
Paul! Oh, God, Paul! My darling, no!
She has fainted. Fetch Françoise and Léonie, quickly!
Well, that's one theory I shall have to dismiss. If ever there was love and grief in a woman's voice, I heard it then.
We left the shed, passed through the house, and went out by the front door. On the sweep of the drive, Poirot paused, looking up at the house.
Monsieur Otte,
Oui.
it is to me incredible that the servants heard nothing. The creaking of that staircase, with 3 people descending, it would awaken the dead. And why did the intruders first try the front door? It was a most unlikely thing that it should be open. It was far more probable that they should try to force a window.
No, but they could not have done so without leaving footprints in the flower bed.
There were 2 large oval flower beds planted with scarlet geraniums on each side of the steps leading up to the front door. Poirot went to the first bed and studied it attentively. There was not an indentation on it anywhere. Then he examined the other flower bed.
Monsieur Otte, see here. Here are plenty of traces for you.
My dear Monsieur Poirot, those are without doubt the footprints of the gardener's large hobnailed boots.
So you think these footprints are of no importance?
I do.
Well, I do not agree with you. I have a little idea that these footprints are the most important things we have seen yet.
Monsieur Otte shrugged his shoulders. He was far too courteous to utter his real opinion. He led us up a path that branched off to the right of the house and was bordered on either side by a kind of shrubbery. Suddenly it emerged into a little clearing with a spectacular view of the sea. And we found ourselves on a wide stretch of open downs.
Why, this is a golf course.
It is not completed yet. Some of the men working on it discovered the body early this morning.
A little to the left was a long, narrow pit, and by it, face downwards, was the body of a man. For a moment, my heart gave a terrible leap, and I had a wild fancy that the tragedy had been duplicated. Then the body stood up.
Monsieur Poirot, if I am not mistaken. I am Monsieur Giraud from the Paris Sûreté.
The famous detective Monsieur Giraud was very tall.
You cut quite a figure in the old days, Poirot. Of course, police methods are very different now.
Crimes, though, are very much the same.
Well, if we are going to find a clue to the murders, here is the spot where we shall find it. I can see the tracks where the 3 of them came through the edge.
The external side, that is what you seek, eh?
Of course. See the spade?
Of course.
That is what the grave was dug with, but you'll get nothing from it. It was Renault's own spade. Those gloves, they are Renault's too. The man was stabbed with his own dagger and would have been buried with his own spade. They counted on leaving no traces, but I'll beat them. There's always something, and I mean to find it.
And does this piece of lead piping also belong to the murdered man?
That may have been lying around here for weeks. It doesn't interest me.
Oh, I, on the contrary, find it very interesting. Monsieur Ote, what is the meaning of this whitewashed line that extends all around the grave? Is it a device of the police?
No, Monsieur Poirot. It is an affair of the golf course. It shows where there is to be a bunker, as you call it.
A bunker? The irregular hole filled with sand?
You do not play the golf, Monsieur Poirot?
Never. Oh, what a game. Each hole, it is of a different length. The obstacles, they are not arranged mathematically. Even the greens are frequently uneven. Nothing is symmetrical. But Monsieur Renauld, without doubt, he played the golf.
Yes, he was a keen golfer. It's mainly owing to him and to his large subscriptions that this work is being carried forward.
It was not a very good choice of a spot to bury the body. When the workmen began to dig the bunker, all would have been discovered.
And that proves that they were strangers to the place.
Unless they wanted it to be discovered. But that is clearly absurd, is it not?
We retraced our steps towards the house. The last thing we observed as we left the spot was Giraud, crawling about on all fours, with a thoroughness in his search that I had to admire. Monsieur Ote followed at a distance.
So, Captain Hastings, you are impressed by the human foxhound?
Well, if there's anything to discover, I think Monsieur Giraud of the Sûreté will find it.
I found the piece of lead piping.
I meant little things, traces that may lead us to the murderers.
Mon ami, a clue of 2 feet long is every bit as valuable as one measuring 2 millimeters. It is a romantic notion that all important clues must be infinitesimal. There are several curious points about this case. The wristwatch is 2 hours fast. And if the object of the murderers was revenge, why did they not stab Renauld in his sleep and have done with it?
Because they wanted the secret.
Well, where is this secret? He is found murdered close at hand, almost within earshot of the house. And those creaky stairs. Why did the servants hear nothing?
Monsieur Poirot.
Monsieur Ote.
I wish to pay a visit to Madame de Bray.
The woman who was a regular visitor of Monsieur Renauld?
Her villa is but a short walk. We may be fortunate enough to get a clue from her. Monsieur Renaud did not confide the secret to his wife, but perhaps he told it to the woman whose love held him enslaved.
Is Monsieur Giraud not going to accompany us?
Monsieur Giraud prefers to conduct the case in his own way. Although he did have some useful information. It seems that 3 times in the last 6 weeks, Madame de Bray has paid a large sum into her banking account. Altogether, 200,000 francs.
A few minutes later, we arrived at the house of Madame de Bray, and I suddenly realized that it was the same house where earlier that day I had seen the beautiful girl with the anxious eyes.
Can I help you, gentlemen?
Mademoiselle, we regret to disturb you, but will your mother grant us a few moments?
Please, come inside.
You wish to see me, monsieur?
Yes, madame. We are investigating the death of Monsieur Paul Renauld. We have reason to believe that you are in the habit of visiting him at his villa in the evenings. Is that so?
I deny your right to ask me such a question.
Madame, we are investigating a murder.
Well, what of it? I had nothing to do with it.
But you knew the dead man well, madame. Did he ever confide in you that he was in danger?
Never.
Did he ever mention his life in South America?
I know nothing about that.
Or any enemies he may have made there?
No! Can't his wife tell you what you want to know? Why would he confide in me?
Because, madame, a man tells to his mistress what he does not always tell to his wife.
Monsieur, you insult me. And in front of my daughter. Now please have the goodness to leave my house.
We left the Villa Marguerite like a pack of shamefaced schoolboys. Monsieur Ote went back to the Villa Geneviève, while Poirot and I set off for the hotel a few hundred yards down the road, where we had booked rooms.
The French police system is very marvelous, don't you agree, Hastings? The information they possess about everyone's life. They are perfectly well acquainted with Monsieur Renaud's tastes and pursuits, and at a moment's notice they can produce information as to Madame de Broy's banking account.
Monsieur!
Someone was running down the road after us. It was Martha Dubreuil.
Wait. I beg your pardon. Oh, you must not tell my mother, but is it true what the people say that Monsieur Renauld called in a detective before he died? Are you he?
Yes, mademoiselle, it is I, but how do you know?
Oh, Madame Renaud's maid told our maid.
Ah, well, what is it you want to know, mademoiselle?
Is anyone suspected of the murder of Monsieur Renauld?
Suspicion is in the air.
But of anyone in particular?
Well, there are two suspects. Their names are unknown, but they are presumed to be from South America. And now you see what comes of being young and beautiful. I have betrayed professional secrets to you.
Oh, merci, monsieur. Oh, I must go back now. Maman will miss me.
Come along, Hastings. Hastings!
What?
Are we to stand here all night just because you have seen a beautiful young woman?
Forgive me, Poirot, but she truly is beautiful. Anyone might be excused for being bowled over by a...
First the girl on the train, and now this one. Mon ami, do not set your sights on Martha de Broy.
But she has the face of an angel.
She is not for you. Take it from Papa Poirot. Sacre. If only I could remember where I had seen that face.
What face? The daughter's?
No, the mother. It was a long time ago when I was still with the police in Belgium. I've never actually seen the woman before, but I have seen her picture, and in connection with a case.
Next morning, we were up at the villa early. As we entered, the younger maid, Leonie, was just coming down the stairs with a breakfast tray.
Madame Renauld will eat nothing, and so pale. I would never grieve like that for a man who had deceived me with another woman.
There must have been many arguments between them in the last few months?
Between them, never, monsieur. Madame is always very calm. She would never argue.
And monsieur?
Oh, when he was angry, the whole house knew of it. The day that he quarreled with Monsieur Jacques, they must have been held in the marketplace. They shouted so loud.
Monsieur Renaud quarreled with his son.
Oh, yes. It was just before Monsieur Jacques went to Paris. He nearly missed his train. He had to run for the station. I was dusting the salon and saw him pass. His face was white, with two burning spots of red. Monsieur was like a thundercloud all day. Leonie? Excusez-moi. Françoise calls me. She always scolds.
Well, what now? Where is Monsieur Giraud?
I believe he has gone back to the scene of the crime. You know, the bunker.
Will you go and join him?
No, I shall wait in the salon.
Well, I'd like to go and see what Giraud's up to, if you don't mind.
The human foxhound. Oh, by all means, my friend. Au revoir.
I strolled out of the front door into the June sunshine and turned up the path we had taken the day before. I didn't go directly to the spot, however, but turned aside into the bushes so as to come out on the golf links, some 100 yards or so further to the right. If Giraud was still there, I wanted to observe his methods before he knew of my presence. But the shrubbery here was much denser, and I had quite a struggle to force my way through. When I emerged at last onto the course, it was with such vigour that I cannoned heavily into a young lady.
Oh! Good heavens, it's you!
Cinderella?
What are you doing here?
More to the point, what are you doing here? When I last saw you 2 days ago, you were going home to your sister. By the way, how is your sister?
How kind of you to ask. My sister is well, I thank you.
She is here with you.
She remained in town.
I don't believe you've got a sister. Now, tell me why you're here.
You've not yet told me what you're doing here. Got the MP in tow, I suppose?
You remember my telling you that my good friend was a detective?
Yes.
And perhaps you've heard about this crime at the Villa Geneviève?
You don't mean the murder? Are you investigating?
I might be.
Oh, good. I want to see all the horrors.
What?
Didn't I tell you I doted on crimes? Why do you think I'm risking my ankles and high-heeled shoes over this stubble? I've been nosing round for hours. Come on, please. Show me all the sights.
I can't do that. Nobody's allowed in.
But can't you pull some strings? I mean, a man in your position.
She slipped a small, soft hand into mine and looked at me with those beautiful blue eyes.
I've never had the chance of being in on a murder like this before. It'll last me all my life. Please?
All my resistance dissolved. I led her through the shrubbery to the small shed. Then, leaving her out of sight in the bushes, I quickly ran back to the house, obtained the key to the shed from the sergeant, and returned to the spot unseen.
Can we go in now?
Look, this is going to be gruesome, you know.
I told you, I want to see everything.
Well, there's the body.
Can I see under the sheet?
If you want to. Are you ready?
Yes.
He was stabbed in the back. Right here.
What was he stabbed with?
That dagger in the jar over there.
Oh. Oh, there's blood on it. Oh, dear. I'm feeling a little dizzy.
I told you it would be too much.
Oh, I think I'm going to faint. Water! Oh, fetch me water! Quickly! Oh.
I left her lying on the floor in the shed and rushed off unobserved to the house. When I returned, a few sips of the brandy and water revived her in a marvellous manner.
Oh, that's better. Oh, that was horrible. Oh, why did you ever bring me in here?
I did my best to stop you, you know.
I suppose you did. Now, take me out of here. Oh, quickly, quickly. Well, goodbye.
Wait a minute. You can't go off on your own like that. You might faint again. I insist on accompanying you back to Merlinville.
No, I'm quite all right now.
But when will I see you again?
Oh, I'm staying at the Hotel du Phare. It's a little place, but quite good. Come and look me up tomorrow.
I watched her disappear out of sight, then turned and retraced my steps to the villa. Suddenly, I remembered that I had not relocked the door of the shed, so I ran back, then quickly returned the key to the sergeant. And as I did so, it came upon me suddenly that though Cinderella had given me her address, I still did not know her name. I found Poirot in the salon with the examining magistrate Monsieur Autet and Monsieur Giraud of the Sûreté.
Tell me, Monsieur Giraud, does nothing strike you as familiar about this case? Is there nothing it reminds you of?
Familiar? I don't think so.
Well, a crime almost precisely similar has been committed before.
When? And where?
That, unfortunately, I cannot for the moment remember. I had hoped you might be able to assist me.
These crimes of masked men all resemble each other, more or less.
Au contraire, monsieur. Man is an unoriginal animal. The English murderer who disposed of his wives in succession by drowning them in their baths was a case in point. Had he varied his methods, he might have escaped detection to this day, but he obeyed the common dictates of human nature, arguing that what had once succeeded would succeed again, and he paid the penalty of his lack of originality.
And the point of all this?
That when you have two crimes precisely similar in design and execution, you find the same brain behind them both. I'm looking for that brain, Monsieur Giraud, and I shall find it.
At that moment, the door was thrown violently open, and a tall young man strode into the room.
Let go of me! I have every right to be here!
Just for a moment, I had the uncanny sensation that the dead man had come to life again.
Monsieur Poirot, this is Jacques Renauld, son of the deceased. Sit down, please, Monsieur Renauld, I beg of you.
I prefer to stand, thank you.
So you did not sail to Buenos Aires, Monsieur Renauld?
No, monsieur. My ship was delayed and then I happened to see an evening paper with the report of my father's death. So I came straight back.
It must have been a terrible shock to you to learn the news that way. However, I am in hopes that you may be able to give us just the information we need to clear up this mystery.
I am at your disposal. Ask any questions you please.
I understand that this journey was being undertaken at your father's request?
Yes.
And the object of this journey?
I have no idea.
Were you on good terms with your father, Monsieur Renauld?
Certainly I was.
No little disputes, eh?
Everyone has a difference of opinion now and then.
But if anyone were to say that you had a violent quarrel with your father on the eve of your departure for Paris, that person would be lying.
Well, we did have an argument, yes.
And in the course of that argument, did you use the phrase, "When you are dead, I can do as I please"? I must request an answer, please, Monsieur Renauld?
Yes, I probably did say that. I was so angry I cannot even remember what I said.
And what was the subject of your quarrel?
I decline to tell you that.
Do not trifle with the law. What was the subject of the quarrel?
I will inform you if you like. The subject of the quarrel was Mademoiselle Marthe de Broglie.
Is this so, monsieur?
Yes. I love Mademoiselle de Broglie, and I wish to marry her. When I informed my father of the fact, he flew at once into a violent rage. Naturally, I could not stand hearing the girl I loved insulted, and I too lost my temper.
When you informed your father of your intentions towards Mademoiselle de Broglie, he was surprised?
Yes. He reminded me that I was entirely dependent on him.
You were aware, then, of the terms of your father's will?
I knew that he had left half his fortune to me, the other half in trust for my mother to come to me at her death.
To pass to another matter, are you acquainted with the name of Duveen, Monsieur Renauld?
Duveen? No, I can't say that I am.
We found this letter in the pocket of your father's coat. Do you know who could have written it?
I have no idea whatsoever. How did my father die?
He was stabbed with your mother's paper knife.
The one that I gave her? But that's impossible, a little thing like that.
Alas, Monsieur Renauld, it is an ideal little tool, I fear. Sharp and easy to handle.
The paper knife? Are you sure it's the one? May I see it?
Sergeant, might I trouble you to fetch the murder weapon?
Certainly, Monsieur le Juge.
Would it not be better to take Monsieur Renauld to the shed? Without doubt, he would wish to see his father's body?
No, I can't face that yet.
Poirot had risen to his feet and was adjusting a pair of candlesticks that struck his trained eye as being a shade askew. Suddenly the door burst open and the sergeant rushed in.
The dagger, it is gone. The glass jar that contained it is empty.
That's impossible. Why, I saw it only this morning.
This morning, Captain Hastings?
Yes?
You went to the shed again?
Yes. Well, it's a little,
Proceed, monsieur.
The fact of the matter is that I bumped into an acquaintance of mine this morning, a young lady. She displayed a great desire to see everything that was to be seen and, well, in short, I took the key to show her the body.
But Captain Hastings, you should not have permitted yourself this folly.
I know. Nothing that you can say could be too severe, Monsieur Ote.
But the lady is without doubt young and beautiful, n'est-ce pas?
She is rather.
But did you not lock the door when you departed?
That's what I blame myself for so terribly. My friend was upset at the sight of the body. She nearly fainted. So I went back to the house to get her some brandy and water. In the excitement, I forgot to relock the door. I only remembered when I got back to the villa.
Then for 20 minutes at least the door was unlocked.
I'm afraid so.
Oh, this is deplorable.
I find it admirable.
Admirable, Monsieur Giraud? Why?
Because we know now that the assassin, or an accomplice of the assassin, has been near the villa only an hour ago. It will be strange if, with that knowledge, we do not shortly lay hands upon him.
Let us return to the hotel for lunch, Hastings, and you shall recount to me in full the indiscretions of this morning.
We slipped quietly out of the room and into the hall. I opened the front door and was about to go down the steps when Poirot's voice arrested me.
One little moment, my friend.
He whipped out his yard ruler and proceeded to measure an overcoat hanging in the hall from the collar to the hem. Then, with a little satisfied grunt, he followed me out into the open air.
Why did you do that?
Do what?
Measure that overcoat.
Parbleu, to see how long it was.
We walked back to the hotel in silence. then went for lunch overlooking the sea.
Eh bien, Captain Hastings. Now you have had 2 romantic liaisons with this charming young lady. First on the train from Paris, the second here. What is her name?
I don't actually know. I keep forgetting to ask. I call her Cinderella.
Yet only yesterday you were mesmerized by Martha de Broglie.
She asked me to look her up. But of course I shan't. Cinderella, that is.
You are wise. Someday, if you permit, Papa Poirot will arrange you a marriage of great suitability.
Thank you, but the prospect leaves me cold.
Oh, les Anglais. No method. Absolutely none whatsoever. You leave all to chance. Mademoiselle Cinderella is staying at the Hôtel d'Angleterre, you told me, is she not?
No, Hotel du Phare.
True, I forgot.
Surely I had never mentioned any hotel to Poirot. I looked across at him. He was cutting his bread into neat little squares, completely absorbed in his task. Then suddenly he drew his watch from his pocket.
Well, I should be starting.
Are you going somewhere?
The train to Paris leaves at 2:25.
Paris?
That is what I said, mon ami.
Well, why?
To look for the murderer of Monsieur Renauld.
You think he is in Paris?
I am quite certain that he is not. Nevertheless, it is there that I must look for him. I will explain it all to you in good time.
Well, talking of explanations, how did you know about Jack and Martha being lovers?
Oh, mon ami, I know human nature. Throw together a vigorous young man like Renauld and a beautiful girl like Mademoiselle Martha, and the result is almost inevitable. Then, the fierce quarrel between father and son. It was either over money or a woman. And remembering Leonie's description of the young man's anger, I decided on the latter. Oh, but I must go.
You've plenty of time for the 2:25.
But I do not wish to rush, to hurry, to excite myself.
I'll come and see you all.
Now, you will do nothing of the sort. I forbid it. You permit that I embrace you? No, I forgot that it is not the English custom. Au revoir, Captain Hastings.
I felt rather at a loose end after Poirot had left me, so I strolled down towards the Hôtel du Phare. It was annoying in the extreme not to know the lady's name, but I took the concierge aside, slipped 5 francs into his hand, and described Cinderella to him.
No, monsieur. There's no such lady staying here.
But this was the hotel that she gave.
Monsieur must have made a mistake. Or it is more likely the lady did, since there has been another gentleman here inquiring for her.
Another gentleman? What did he look like?
A small gentleman, well-dressed, very neat, very spotless. The moustache, very stiff. The head of a peculiar shape.
So that was why he refused to let me accompany him to the station. The impertinence of it. I went back to the hotel and turned in early, hoping that the next day would bring forth something of interest. I was wholly unprepared for what it did bring forth. I was eating my petit déjeuner in the dining room when the waiter, who had been talking to someone outside, came rushing back in.
Monsieur, pardon me, but you are connected, are you not, with the affair at the Villa Geneviève?
Yes. Why?
Monsieur has not heard the news?
What news?
Monsieur, c'est incroyable. There has been another murder.
I grabbed my hat and ran as fast as I could. Another murder at the Villa Geneviève, and Poirot away. I dashed through the gates and up the drive. Françoise, the housekeeper, was coming out of the front door.
Oh, monsieur, there is a curse upon the house. Never will I sleep another night under that roof.
Yes, but who has been killed?
Oh, a stranger. They found him over there in the potting shed, not 100 yards from where they found poor monsieur.
I turned towards where she was pointing and ran up the path to a shabby old gardener's hut. Inside, the light was dim, but when my eyes became accustomed, I saw a man crouched on the floor among the old pots and tools, examining every inch of the ground with a pocket torch. It was Giraud of the Sûreté.
Ah, Monsieur Hastings. Let us see what you can make of this affair.
The dead man lay flat out on his back to one side. He was of medium height, about 50 years of age, and neatly dressed in a dark blue tailored suit. His face was terribly convulsed, and on his left side, just over the heart, the hilt of a dagger stood up, black and shining. I knew it at once. It was the same dagger I had seen in the glass jar the preceding day.
What time did you last see that dagger?
About 10 o'clock yesterday morning.
Then I should be inclined to fix the crime as being committed not long after that.
But how can that be? People were passing this shed continually.
Look at him. Does a man stabbed to the heart fall like that, neatly, with his feet together and his arms to his side? No. He was dragged here after he was dead by two people. The tracks show on the ground outside. Do you notice anything else?
No.
Look at his hands.
His nails are broken and rather dirty. Those are not the hands of a gentleman.
And yet his suit is very expensive. That is curious, is it not?
Very.
Sergeant, why is Madame Renauld not here? I sent for her a quarter of an hour ago.
She is coming up the path now, monsieur. And her son is with her.
Good. Send them in one at a time.
A moment later, Madame Renauld appeared.
Madame, here is the man. Do you know him?
I have never seen him in my life.
Very well, madame. That is all then.
Jack Renault also failed to identify the man. Then a third person was brought in.
This is an outrage! What have I to do with all this?
It was Madame Dubreuil.
Madame, I am investigating not one murder, but two. For all I know, you may have committed them both.
How dare you insult me by such a wild accusation? I know nothing of either crime. Anyone who says I do lies.
Calm yourself, madame. No one has accused you as yet. Please, look at the dead man. Have you ever seen him before?
I do not know him.
Very well. You may go.
At that moment, Monsieur Otey, the examining magistrate, accompanied by the doctor, came in.
This is extraordinary, Monsieur Giraud. Who is the victim this time?
He has not yet been identified. He has been stabbed in the heart, as you see, with the dagger that was stolen yesterday morning.
Could it possibly be one of the assassins? They may have fallen out among themselves.
Monsieur, you say this man was killed yesterday morning?
Yes, doctor. I fixed it by the theft of the dagger. He may, of course, have been killed later in the day.
Fiddlesticks. This man has been dead at least 48 hours, and probably longer.
We were still recovering from the surprise of the doctor's announcement when a telegram was brought to me. It was from Poirot and announced his return to Merlinville by the train arriving at 12:28. I had just enough time to get to the station and meet him there. The train was some minutes late, and it occurred to me that I might pass the time by asking the porter whether Jack Renault had indeed left Merlinville by the last train on the night of his father's murder.
No, monsieur. To arrive and start off again within half an hour would be unusual.
You mean that Jack Renault arrived at Merlinville that evening?
Oui, monsieur. But the last train arriving the other way, the 11:40.
That then was the reason of Martha's anxiety. Jack Renault had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime. My cogitations were interrupted by the arrival of the train, and in another moment, Poirot was beaming at me and, forgetting my English reluctance, embracing me warmly.
Mon cher ami!
All right.
Now, let us go directly to the hotel. I must attend to my moustaches. They are deplorably limp after the heat of traveling.
But have you heard the latest here? There has been another murder.
Another murder? But that demolishes my theory. It ruins everything. Wait, I cannot be wrong. There is only one explanation. I must be right. Therefore, this new murder is impossible. Unless the victim is a man of middle age. His body was found in the locked shed near the scene of the crime and had been dead for at least 48 hours. And it is most probable that he was stabbed in a similar manner to Monsieur Renauld, though not necessarily in the back.
Poirot, how on earth could you know all that?
The little grey cells, my friend. The little grey cells. Now, tell me all. If we go round to the left here, we can take a shortcut across the golf links, which will bring us to the back of the Villa Geneviève much more quickly.
Another few minutes and we were squeezing ourselves into the tiny potting shed alongside Giraud, Ote, and the doctor.
What is this pile of rags by the door?
Are these the old clothes of the gardeners, perhaps?
Poirot knelt down by the body. He examined the fine tailoring, the dirty broken fingernails, and the old man's weather-beaten face.
Doctor, there is foam on the lips. You observed it?
I didn't notice it, I must admit.
But you observe it now?
Certainly.
And the wound? It has not bled. There is no stain on the clothes. What do you think, Monsieur le Docteur?
It is most abnormal.
Au contraire, it is not abnormal at all. It is most simple. The man was stabbed after he was dead. He died, if I'm not much mistaken, of an epileptic fit.
Poirot was the hero of the hour. We returned to the hotel and ate lunch on the terrace, after which I begged him to tell me something of his mysterious journey to Paris.
Oh, willingly, my friend. I went to Paris to find this. Do you recognize anyone in this picture?
I do. It's obviously an old photo. The hair is styled differently, but that is without doubt Madame de Broye.
Except she did not call herself by that name in those days. This is a picture of the notorious Madame Beroldi. Do you remember that case?
The Beroldi murder case, I certainly do. Madame Beroldi was found bound and gagged with her husband dead beside her. There was some story about masked men breaking in, but it turned out it was all faked. She had used her lover to murder her husband and dumped the lover so that she could marry some rich American.
And do you remember the name of the rejected lover?
Was it Georges something?
Georges Conneau.
That's right, Georges Conneau. When he learned he'd been duped, he disappeared, and somehow Madame Beroldi was acquitted.
That's right. She was a very beautiful woman and a very convincing witness. She also had a small child, I believe a little girl.
Poirot, I congratulate you. I see everything now.
You do?
Yes, and it must have been Madame de Broye, otherwise known as Madame Beroldi, who murdered Mr. Renauld. The similarity of the two cases proves that beyond a doubt.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's obvious because...
Well, you see, you come at once to a stumbling block. Why should Madame de Broye murder Monsieur Renauld? She does not benefit by his death. Considered as either mistress or blackmailer, she stands to lose. You cannot have a murder without a motive. Besides, I have a bigger objection. You have spoken of the similarity between the two crimes.
Yes, the story of the masked men and all that.
But you are forgetting, mon ami. It was not Madame de Broye who told us this tale of being tied up. It was Madame Renauld.
Of course.
Concentrate your little grey cells, mon ami. In many ways, I have been an imbecile. But now, I see clearly.
You know the murderer?
I know one murderer. But this is not one crime. It's two. The first I have solved. The second... I confess, I'm not so sure. Ah, here he is.
Who?
Jacques Renauld. I sent a note up to the villa to ask him to come here.
Monsieur Poirot.
Monsieur Renauld, please take a seat. Thank you for coming here. The atmosphere of the villa is not too congenial to me. Monsieur Giraud and I do not see eye to eye about everything.
He is an ill-conditioned brute, and I'd be delighted to see someone score at his expense.
Then, may I ask a little favor of you?
Certainly.
Would you be so kind as to go to the railway station and take a train to the next station along the line? Abalac. Ask at the cloakroom whether two foreigners deposited a valise there on the night of the murder. Will you do this? It will very much assist me in my investigation.
Of course. I'll go right away.
One moment, Monsieur Jacques. There is one little matter that puzzles me. Why did you not mention to Monsieur Ote this morning that you were in Merlinville the night of the crime? We know it is true. There is no point in concealing it.
So what if I were? I hope you do not mean to accuse me of participating in my father's murder.
I should like an explanation of the reason that brought you here.
I came to see my fiancée, Martha de Broye. I was on the eve of a long voyage. I wished to see her before I went, to assure her of my unchanging devotion.
And you did see her?
Well, I'd better be on my way to the station. Au revoir!
He has taken the bait. He will go to Abalak and will inquire for the mythical valise left by the mythical foreigners.
You wanted him out of the way.
Now, Hastings, to the Villa Geneviève.
As we passed the Villa Marguerite, Poirot hesitated and kneeled down behind a hedge.
Hastings, get down.
What on earth are you doing?
Mademoiselle Martha is in the garden. I desire to speak with her, and I would prefer not to call formally at the Villa Marguerite. Psst, mademoiselle. Psst, un moment, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur Poirot?
A little word, if it is permitted.
Certainly.
Mademoiselle, do you remember asking me if anyone were suspected of the crime?
And you told me 2 South Americans.
If you were to ask me that question again, I should give you a different answer. Giraud of the Sûreté has a suspect in his sights.
Who?
Jacques Renauld.
Jacques? Impossible.
You know, of course, that he was here on the night of the murder.
Yes, he told me.
It was unwise of him to have tried to conceal the fact.
Yes, but Jacques Renauld is innocent and we must save him.
Mademoiselle, is there not something that you are keeping back that you could tell us?
Yes, there is something, but I hardly know whether you will believe it. It seems so absurd.
At any rate, tell us, mademoiselle.
Monsieur Giraud sent for me earlier to see if I could identify the man in the shed. I could not. But since then I have been thinking. On the morning of the day Monsieur Renauld was murdered, I was walking in the garden here, when I heard a sound of men's voices quarrelling. I looked through the bushes and saw that one of the men was Monsieur Renauld, and the other was a tramp in filthy rags. I gathered he was asking for money, but at that moment, Maman called me from the house and I had to go. I was confused when I looked at the dead man in the shed, because he is dressed in gentleman's clothes, but I am almost sure he is the tramp.
Martha, viens ici.
Forgive me, I must go.
Was that story true?
It is a curious tale, but I believe it to be the absolute truth. And she told us the truth on another point. When I asked her if she knew that Jacques Renauld was here that night, she did not answer yes. She said, "He told me." Now, Hastings, what was Jacques Renauld doing here on that eventful evening? And if he did not see Mademoiselle Martha, whom did he see?
Surely you don't think Jack murdered his own father? What motive did he have?
Money, of course. Remember that Jacques Renauld thought he would inherit half of his father's fortune.
Well, what are we going to do now?
I wish to make a search amongst the effects of Monsieur Jacques Renauld. That is why I had to get him out of the way for a few hours. To the Villa Geneviève.
Poirot! A car has just driven up.
Haha! I have found what I want.
Giraud is getting out. He has Jacques Renauld with him and 2 gendarmes.
Well, let us get out of here, quickly, into the hall.
What is happening? What are you doing with my son?
He is under arrest for the murder of his father. He was trying to make a getaway, but I was too quick for him.
But it's not true. It can't be true. Oh!
Fetch the doctor, quickly!
The doctor was brought to tend to Madame Renauld, and we left the house. Poirot walked with his head down, frowning.
Do you believe that Jack is innocent?
I do not know, Hastings. The gravest indictment against him is known only to me.
What is that?
If you would use your grey cells and see the whole case clearly as I do, you too would perceive it, my friend.
This was what I called one of Poirot's irritating answers. He went on, without waiting for me to speak.
Let us walk this way to the sea. We will sit on that little mound there and review the case.
We established ourselves on the grassy knoll, looking out to sea.
Now, my friend, the little grey cells. Arrange your ideas. Be methodical. Be orderly. Think of the Baroldi case. Who was the murderer of Madame de Broy's husband?
Georges Cano.
And what happened to him after the murder?
He vanished 20 years ago. But we have no reason to believe that he is dead.
Continue.
Suppose
He's fallen on hard times and become a tramp. He happens to come to Merlinville, where quite by chance he finds Madame Dubreuil, the woman he has never ceased to love. But she has a new lover, the Englishman Renauld. Georges Queneau quarrels with this Renauld, then lies in wait for him and stabs him in the back. Terrified at what he has done, he starts to dig a grave. Madame Dubreuil comes out to look for her lover. She and Queneau have a terrible scene. He drags her into the shed, and there suddenly Georges Queneau falls down in an epileptic fit.
I think you should write for the cinema, mon ami. It would make a good film, the story you have just recounted.
Oh, do you think so?
But it bears no sort of resemblance to reality.
Oh. Well, I admit that I haven't gone into all the details.
You have gone further. You have ignored them magnificently. You made a fundamental error, mon ami. Now, what do we know? 23rd of May, Paul Renauld quarrels with his son Jacques over his wish to marry Martha de Broglie. Jacques leaves for Paris. 24th of May, Renauld alters his will, leaving entire control of his fortune in his wife's hands. 7th of June, he quarrels with a tramp in the garden, witnessed by Martha de Broglie. He sends a letter to Monsieur Hercule Poirot imploring assistance. He sends a telegram to his son Jacques telling him proceed by ship to Buenos Aires. He sends his chauffeur off on a holiday. That evening he received a visitor. As he is seeing her out, his words are, "Yes, yes, but for God's sake, go now." Who was she?
Someone called Bella Duveen.
Why do you think that?
Because of the letter in his overcoat.
But what makes you think that letter was written to him? Remember that the father, Monsieur Paul Renauld, wore his overcoat very long. You saw me measuring the overcoat of Jacques Renauld, his son. Jacques wears his overcoat very short. Put those two facts together with a third, namely that Jacques Renauld ran out of the house in a hurry on his departure for Paris, and tell me what you make of it.
He grabbed the wrong coat. The letter wasn't in the father's overcoat, it was in the son's. It was Jacques who was having the affair with Bella Duveen.
And that is why she came to see Paul Renauld that night. She told him she had a claim on his son. Renauld tried to buy her off. Remember the fragment of check with the name Duveen? This she indignantly tore up. In the end, he got rid of her, and the words that he used are significant.
Yes, but for God's sake, go now.
He was desperately anxious for the girl to leave. Why? Because time was slipping by, and for some reason, time was precious. We are now fast approaching the actual drama. It is 10:30 when Bella Duveen leaves, and by the evidence of the wristwatch, we know that the crime was committed, or at any rate that it was staged, before 12 o'clock. Now, by the doctor's evidence, the tramp, when found, had been dead at least 48 hours. Mon ami, I have taken you step by step along the way. Do you not now see what is so glaringly plain?
For heaven's sake, Poirot! You really are the most irritating of fellows. Please get on and tell me who killed Monsieur Renauld.
That is just what I am not sure of as yet.
But you said it was glaringly plain.
We talk at cross purposes, my friend. Remember, it is 2 crimes we are investigating, for which, as I pointed out to you, we have the 2 bodies. Now, mon ami, let me ask you a question. Who do we believe to have planned this crime?
Georges Queneau.
Exactly. So we know that Madame Renauld is lying to protect someone. Perhaps her son. Perhaps the man she loves.
Yes, seems logical enough.
Bien. If Madame Renauld loves Georges Queneau, who then is Georges Queneau?
The tramp.
Have we any evidence to show that Madame Renauld loved the tramp?
No, but...
Ask yourself instead whom Madame Renauld did love. Who did Madame Renauld love so dearly that when she saw his dead body, she fell down in a faint?
Her husband, Paul Renauld.
Paul Renauld, or Georges Queneau, whichever you like to call him.
Paul Renauld is really Georges Queneau? Oh, but it's impossible. That brings us to the ridiculous statement that he planned his own murder.
Eh bien, mon ami, that is just what he did do. Monsieur Renauld planned his own death, but there is one detail that perhaps escapes you. He planned his death, but did not intend to die. It is simple. After the Baroldi murder, Georges Conneau flees from justice. Under an assumed name, he marries Madame Renauld and acquires a vast fortune in South America. But there is a nostalgia upon him for his own country. 20 years have elapsed. He considers it quite safe to return. Fate takes him to Merlinville. There, in the whole of France, is the one person who is capable of recognizing him, Madame de Broglie. His arrival is a gold mine to Madame de Broglie. He is absolutely helpless in her power, and she bleeds him heavily. And then the inevitable happens. Jacques Renaud falls in love with her beautiful daughter, Martha. His father is furious. At all costs, he will prevent his son marrying the daughter of this evil woman. Renaud sees only one way of escape, by faking his own death and escaping to another country where he will start again under an assumed name, and where Madame Renaud, having played the widow's part for a while, can join him.
That would mean they would need a dead body to pose as Monsieur Renaud. Where were they planning to get that from?
Who knows? But then chance played into their hands. A rough tramp, violent and abusive, finds his way into the garden. There is a struggle, and suddenly the tramp, an epileptic, falls down in a fit, dead. Monsieur Renaud calls his wife. Together they drag him into the shed and realize what a marvelous opportunity has arisen. They quickly make a plan. The identification must rest solely on Madame Renaud's evidence. Anyone who knows Monsieur Renaud, like his son and the chauffeur, must be got out of the way.
So they dressed the body of the tramp in a suit of Monsieur Renaud's and left his ragged coat and trousers in the shed. That was the pile of rags you spotted by the door.
Bien sûr.
And then, to give credence to the tale Madame Renaud was to tell, they drove the aeroplane dagger through the heart of the dead man. After that, Paul Renauld, or Georges Conneau, first bound and gagged his wife, and then, taking a spade, began to dig a grave in that particular spot of ground where he knows a bunker is to be made. It is essential that the body should be found. Madame de Broglie must have no suspicions.
Then he intended to put on the tramp's old clothes and make his way to the station, where he would leave unnoticed by the 12:10 train.
And since the crime will be supposed to have taken place 2 hours later, no suspicion could possibly attach to him.
You see now his annoyance at the inopportune visit of the girl, Bella Duveen. Every moment of delay is fatal to his plans. He gets rid of her as soon as he can. Then to work. He leaves the front door slightly ajar to create the impression that the assassins left that way. He binds and gags Madame Renaud. The night is chilly, and he slips on an overcoat over his underclothing, intending to cast it into the grave with the dead man. He goes out by the window, smoothing over the flower bed carefully, and walks out onto the lonely golf links and starts to dig. And then the justice that he has so long eluded overtakes him. An unknown hand stabs him in the back. Now, Hastings, you understand what I mean when I talk of two crimes.
You're marvellous. Poirot, absolutely marvellous. No one on earth could have worked that out but you.
You shift your allegiance back from the human foxhound?
Rather. You've scored over him handsomely.
Without doubt, when Madame Renaud recovers, she will have something to say. The possibility of her son being accused of the murder never occurred to her. How should it, when she believed him safely at sea on his way to South America? Imagine the shock when she went to identify the body, and instead of seeing the tramp, she is presented with the lifeless form of her husband. No wonder she fainted. But we must start again.
What?
Well, the question remains. Who killed Paul Renauld? What time is the afternoon boat from Calais?
About 5, I believe.
That will do very well. We shall just have time.
We? Where are we going?
To England, my friend.
Why?
To find a vital witness.
Who?
Miss Bella Duveen, of course. In Jacques Renaud's drawer, I found a photograph of a kind used by professional actors. I have been making inquiries from a theatrical agent I know in London. I think I shall find her quite easily.
Poirot handed me the photograph. The likeness was not first-rate, but it was unmistakable. It was the face of Cinderella.
My sister and I do a song and dance act.
The Dulcibella Kids. That was what Cinderella and her sister were called. Poirot tracked them down to the Palace Theatre and bought us tickets for the evening show. One was flaxen-haired, one dark. They danced and sang. When the curtain fell, there was fulsome applause. My heart beat sickeningly.
Poirot, I'm going outside. I need some air.
Go by all means, mon ami. I will rejoin you later.
It was only a few steps from the theatre to our hotel. I went into the sitting room, ordered a whiskey and soda, and sat drinking it, staring into the fire. Then the door was flung open.
What are you doing here? Is the man with you the detective?
Yes.
Oh, what am I going to do?
Please don't cry. You're safe here. I'll take care of you. Don't cry. Darling, I know everything.
But you don't.
I think I do. You took the dagger, didn't you?
I was afraid there might be fingerprints on it. Are you going to give me up?
Of course not.
Why ever not?
Because I love you, Cinderella.
You can't. Not if you knew.
I know that you came to see Paul Renauld that night. He offered you a cheque, and you tore it up. Then you left the house and...
Go on. What next?
I don't know whether you knew that Jacques Renauld would be coming that night, but you waited. And just before 12, you saw a figure on the golf links. You saw his overcoat and thought you recognized him. Your anger and jealousy about Martha drove you mad, and you struck. I don't believe for a minute that you meant to kill him.
And you say you love me. How can you?
I think love is like that. A thing one cannot help. I have tried, I know, ever since the first day I met you. Love him still, if you have to, but let me help you, please.
You think I love Jacques Renauld? Oh.
Then she flung her arms passionately round my neck and pressed her face to mine, kissing me again and again. It was a sound in the doorway that made us look up. Poirot was standing there looking at us. I did not hesitate.
Quick, get out of here, Cinderella, as fast as you can.
Goodbye, and thank you.
Mon ami, you do this sort of thing very well. I am helpless as a child, but this is uncomfortable and slightly ridiculous. Let us sit down and be calm.
You won't pursue her.
Oh, mon Dieu, am I Giraud? Release me, my friend. You have the strength of a bull when you are roused, Hastings.
I'm sorry. I admit I've behaved badly to you over this, but sometimes one has no choice.
I understand. It is love. Vive l'amour.
I suppose, Poirot, I mustn't ask what your plans are.
Not at all. We return to France without delay.
We?
Precisely. You know very well that you cannot afford to let Papa Poirot out of your sight.
Poirot had hit the nail on the head. The only danger to Cinderella lay with him. At all costs, I must keep near him. We crossed from England by the evening boat and went straight to the village on Vieux.
Ah, Monsieur Otte. How is Madame Renauld?
She has not yet recovered consciousness. It is merciful in a way, poor woman. That reminds me. I have here a letter for you, Monsieur Poirot.
Poirot studied the envelope curiously. He did not open it. Instead, he put it in his pocket and rose to his feet. We were just leaving the villa when we came face to face with Giraud, looking thoroughly pleased with himself.
Ah, Monsieur Poirot. You have returned from England, then.
As you see, Monsieur Giraud.
The end of the case is not far off now, I fancy.
I agree with you.
I'm glad you're satisfied of young Renault's guilt at last.
Oh, but I am not in the least satisfied. Jacques Renauld is innocent.
Talk!
Monsieur Giraud, throughout the case, your manner to me has been deliberately insulting.
You speak of my manner to you being insulting. Once or twice, your manner has annoyed me.
I'm enchanted to hear it. Good morning, Monsieur Giraud. Come, Hastings.
Where are we going now?
To the Villa Marguerite. But first, let us see what is in this letter. Dear Monsieur Poirot, if you get this, I beg of you to come to my aid. I have no one to turn to, and at all costs, Jack must be saved. I implore of you on my knees to help us. Martha the boy.
Within moments, we arrived at the Villa Marguerite. Martha was at the door to meet us.
Monsieur Poirot, I have been in despair, not knowing what to do. It is impossible that Jacques should have done it. Never for 1 minute will I believe it.
And neither do I believe it, mademoiselle.
But then why does he not speak?
Perhaps because he is protecting someone.
Do you mean his mother? From the beginning I have suspected her. Who inherits all that fortune? She does.
Mademoiselle, are you aware of your mother's real name? I see that you do know. Now, a second question. Did you know who Monsieur Renauld was?
Monsieur Renauld?
I see you do not know that. Now, listen to me carefully.
Step by step, he went over the case. Martha listened, spellbound.
But you are the greatest detective in the world.
Oh, no.
Oh, save Jacques, monsieur. I love him so. Please save him.
The next morning we were present at the examination of Jacques Renauld by the magistrate, Monsieur Sûreté. I was shocked at the change that had taken place in the young prisoner. There were deep black circles round his eyes, and he looked distraught.
Jacques Renauld, do you deny that you were in Merlinville on the night of the crime?
I told you. I was in Cherbourg.
But we have witnesses who say that you arrived on the 11:40 train. 2 men have identified you positively. What have you to say?
Nothing.
Do you recognize this dagger?
Of course I do. It is a present given by me to my mother as a souvenir of the war.
Is there, as far as you know, any duplicate of that dagger in existence?
No, the setting was my own design.
Do you fully understand that on the answers you have given me, I shall have no alternative but to commit you for trial?
Monsieur Sûreté, I swear that I did not kill my father.
But you can offer no defense, no alibi. You killed your father for the sake of money which you believed would come to you at his death. Your mother was an accessory after the fact. It was a cold-blooded, calculated murder.
No, Monsieur Sûreté, that is not...
Monsieur le Juge, there's a lady. She says she must speak.
This is highly irregular. I forbid it. I absolutely forbid it.
But a slender figure pushed the gendarme aside. Dressed all in black with a long veil that hid her face, she advanced into the room. I could not help but admire the courage that had led her to take this step. She raised her veil, and I gasped. For a moment I thought it was Cinderella, but it wasn't. It was the girl in the photograph in Jacques Renaud's room.
My name is Bella Devine, and I'm giving myself up for the murder of Paul Renauld.
That evening, back at the hotel, I received a letter. My friend, you will know all when you get this. It was Bella who stole
the dagger. You will also know now that I deceived you, that where you gave me trust, I repaid you with lies. Bella is my twin. I had to use you to save her. It wasn't for myself I did it. That's the only thing I can put forward to say for myself. I wish, my darling, that you could forgive me.
She had begun to sign herself Cinderella, but had crossed that out and written instead her real name, Dulcie Devine.
Did you know all the time that it was her?
Yes, my friend.
Why did you not tell me that night at the hotel?
Well, you were rather, high-handed in your methods, mon ami. You did not give me a chance.
But afterwards...
Well, to begin with, I was hurt at your want of faith in me. And then I wanted to see whether your feelings would stand the test of time. Whether it was true love.
It is love. Well, for me it is, but nowhere in this letter does she say whether she cares for me or not.
No, give it to me. I think you are mistaken, Hastings. She tells you in every line, mon ami.
But how can I find her? There's no address on the letter.
Do not excite yourself. Leave it to Papa Poirot. Ah, that will be Jacques Renauld. Come in.
Monsieur Poirot. I am free.
Oh, congratulations. But you look mournful.
I went through it to protect Bella, and now it's all no use.
Oh, she was bound to come forward when she saw you heading straight for the guillotine.
What's going to happen to her?
Do not distress yourself unduly. The French courts are very lenient to youth, beauty, and crimes of passion. But tell me, what exactly happened that night when you came back from Cherbourg?
There's very little to tell. The train was late, and I decided to take the shortcut across the golf links. I could easily get into the grounds of the Villa Marguerite from there. I had nearly reached the place when I heard a terrible cry, a sort of choke and gasp. And in the moonlight, I saw the grave, and a figure lying face downwards with a dagger sticking in the back. Then I looked up and saw Bella. She gave a cry and turned and ran.
And afterwards?
I stood there for a time, dazed. And then I realized I'd better get away as fast as I could.
Yes?
I have a message for you, monsieur. Madame Renauld has regained consciousness.
Then let us all go to Merlinville at once. Jack, why don't you go and tell Mademoiselle Marthe that you are free, and I will give the good news to your mother.
I will. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot.
When we arrived at the Villa Geneviève, Poirot explained that he must see Madame Renauld at once, alone, and the housekeeper conducted him upstairs. It was some time before Poirot reappeared, and he was looking unusually grave.
Vous voilà, Hastings. There are squalls ahead.
What do you mean?
You will see.
Ah, here's Jack and Martha Dubreuil.
Monsieur Poirot, thanks to you, Jack is free. I am so happy.
Yes. Thank you again, Monsieur Poirot.
At that moment, Madame Renauld appeared at the top of the stairs, her head still bandaged, her eyes glaring in fury.
What an outrage!
Mother!
You are no son of mine. From this day I renounce you. Your father's blood is on your head. Tomorrow I shall change my will. You shall never touch a penny of his money. Now get out of my house!
We were all dumbfounded. Jack Renauld, worn out with all he had already gone through, swayed and nearly fell.
Oh, we must take him to the Villa Marguerite. We will nurse him, my mother and I.
We went back to the hotel. At the concierge desk, Poirot asked a question which surprised me.
Has an English lady, Miss Robinson, arrived?
Yes, monsieur. I will fetch her.
Who on earth is Miss Robinson?
I have arranged you a marriage, Hastings. Do you think I wish to trumpet aloud in Merlinville the name of Duveen?
Here she is.
Hello.
Oh, Cinderella! What is this? Poirot?
All will be explained. Go and rest yourself, my dear. Hastings and I have work to do.
But where are you going?
I have set a little trap. You shall hear all about it tomorrow.
Whatever you're up to, I'm coming too.
But, mademoiselle...
I'm coming too, I tell you.
Very well. But it will not be amusing.
We walked along the road in silence, and when we arrived at the Villa Geneviève, the whole place was in total darkness.
What are we going to do?
Wait and watch. I do not expect anything to happen for at least an hour, if anything happens at all. Milton, so soon?
Dashing forward, Poirot battered wildly on the front door. Cinderella, meanwhile, started climbing the tree under Madame Renaud's window.
What on earth are you doing?
I'm helping.
But it's dangerous. You could fall.
I'm an acrobat, remember?
I watched with my heart in my mouth as Cinderella reached the top of the tree, then climbed along a precarious ledge and through the window. Then a cry of absolute terror floated out into the night. At the same moment, the front door burst open and we rushed up the stairs. There was the sound of a heavy fall within. After a moment or two, the key turned and the door swung slowly open. Cinderella, looking very pale, beckoned us in.
Is Madame Renauld safe?
Yes, I was just in time.
This young woman saved me. I was nearly strangled.
On the ground lay a figure wrapped in some dark material, a fold of which hid the face.
Is she dead?
I think so. Her head struck the marble fender.
But who is it?
That is the murderer of Paul Renauld, Hastings. And the would-be murderer of Madame Renauld.
Puzzled and uncomprehending, I knelt down and, lifting the fold of the cloth, looked into the beautiful dead face of Martha Dubreuil. I have confused memories of the further events of that night. Poirot seemed deaf to my repeated questions.
I was sure it was Bella Devine who killed Monsieur Renauld.
No, Hastings. She said she did, yes, but that was to save the man she loved from the guillotine.
What? I mean, every time I think I understand this case, I am confounded.
Now, remember Jacques Renaud's story. Both he and Bella arrived on the scene at the same instant, and each took the other to be the murderer. The girl stares at him in horror, and then with a cry rushes away. But when she hears that he has been accused, she cannot bear it, and comes forward to accuse herself and save him from certain death.
But what possible motive could Martha have for murdering Paul Renauld?
Money, of course. Paul Renauld was a millionaire several times over, and at his death, half of that vast fortune would pass to his son, or so she believed.
So today, when Madame Renaud publicly disowned Jack...
Yes, that was my little trap. In that moment, Martha realized that the only way to get her hands on the money was to murder Madame Renaud. Then the whole fortune would pass to her son, and to her.
I don't know how you do it.
Well, I have my methods, and Madame Renauld proved to be a fine actor. But Martha de Broglie was caught in the end, not by Hercule Poirot, but by La Petite Acrobate.
You're right. When did you first begin to suspect Martha? Was it when she told us she had overheard the quarrel in the garden?
No. It was the very first day we arrived at Merlinville. You asked me if I had noticed a beautiful young goddess, and I replied to you that I had seen only a girl with anxious eyes. That is how I have thought of Martha de Broglie from the beginning. The girl with the anxious eyes.
Poirot was triumphant. The case was solved, but the story wasn't quite over yet. The next morning, just as we were packing to leave, there was a knock on the door.
I've come to say goodbye. I'm sailing for South America. I mean to start a new life out there.
You will go alone, Monsieur Jacques?
My mother will come with me.
No one else? What about the girl who loves you very dearly, who has been willing to lay down her life for you?
Bella Duveen? How could I ask her after I left her for Martha? I've been such a damned fool.
So have all of us, at one time or another. Take my advice, mon ami. Go to her as a man bowed by experience, but looking forward to a new and wonderful life. Ask her to share it with you. You may not realize it, but your love for each other has been tested in the fire and not found wanting. You have both been willing to lay down your lives for each other.
Hercule Poirot. You really are a genius.
And what of my story? Captain Arthur Hastings, humble chronicler of these pages. In the early morning, the beach at Merlinville was deserted. The sea was calm, and the sky of the palest blue.
Arthur? Is that your name?
Yes, it is. I still don't know what to call you.
My real name is Dulcie.
But it seems so unfamiliar. So it's got to be Cinderella. Cinderella married the prince, you know.
Even though she was only a poor servant girl.
Do you know what a prince would say to that?
Well, I think he'd say, oh, hell.
And then what?
And then he'd kiss her.
And I suited the action to the word.